Some Afcon, which kicks off next week. So for those viewers that might not be informed about this competition, can you tell us why this is important and sort of its perception in the footballing world?
I'll start with the second part of your question, which is the perception in the football world. Unfortunately, from the European standpoint, from the Western standpoint, it's not considered very important. A lot of managers, a lot of owners have come out and complained about the fact that it's being held during this January period, which admittedly it does affect many of the domestic clubs in Europe. But it's key. It's a critical component of African football development, which obviously trickles down into European football, as so many European clubs, big clubs, small clubs, they have African players in their teams. And these African players, many of them wouldn't come to be what they are if it wasn't for this competition. It's also an incredible scouting point for teams all across the world. And so it's huge. It's big. It's the biggest showpiece on the continent, and it's an emotional one for all of us African and African football proponents.
Mbizo, first of all, Happy New Year. Congratulations on the new place. I'm glad we can find the money to give you so you can upgrade, because that was incredible. Because I'm in the same apartment as I was before I started here. But I want to ask specifically about a country that I think a lot of people are focusing on. A North African country in Egypt, which a lot of people are considering to be there a little bit of a dark horse. Mo Salah has never won Afcon. You know, I think back to, Lionel Messi winning Copa America and how meaningful that was to him and how important it was for his career. I'm thinking for Mo Salah, this might be his last chance, potentially, depending on, obviously how healthy he stays, to win the Africa Cup of Nations. What do you think the chances are of them doing it, getting out of Group B?
Well, there's certainly a stigma on the continent about African players who are top and big in Europe, but fail to do the same performances on the continent. So certainly in terms of his African legacy, it would be critical for him to perform on the continent. Egypt always has a chance. Egypt always has a chance. They're one of the most winningest teams in Afcon history. And so certainly they have a chance. But I think you described them perfectly when you call them dark horses, because despite being a top team with a top history, they are not quite as good on paper or in practice as some of the other giants that they'll be facing. They can certainly get out of the group, but then it would get precarious from there.
Mbizo, Senegal, defending champions, would you consider them to be in the group of death with the likes of Cameroon, Gambia and Guinea? They look easy by namesake, but on paper, the players that they have, would you say that is the group of death of this tournament?
I absolutely agree with that, Nigel. I absolutely agree. I think that is probably the hardest group, and then the group that unfortunately Bafana is in is also one of the top groups. And look, Senegal is not in their golden age, but they're extremely strong and extremely well balanced, attack through defense. They still boast some big names, right? And I think the only team that rivals them in terms of their team on paper is probably Ivory Coast. And I mean, they're spectacular. Diallo, Jacobs, Pape Gay, Nampalys Mendy, Ghana Gay, Jackson Sarr, Sadio Dia. I mean, this is a team that reads like an all-star team. And I think as defending champions, as reigning champions, they will certainly feel that they have the confidence to go and do it again. And one of my favorite managers in the history of the game as well, Aliou, will also be confident that they can do a repeat here.
Mbizo, you named a lot of big names. Yet I didn't hear two of the biggest names in the whole continent. We're talking about the Super Eagles in Nigeria. What are their chances? Because we're talking about Victor Boniface, Victor Osimhen, along with Samuel Chukwueze, Ademola Lookman, Iwobi, Basi, Iheanacho. I mean, these are all seasoned vets. How dangerous is this Nigeria attack, and do you see them going far in this tournament?
I mean, their attacking fortitude is absolutely unquestionable. I think all of those players are in form at the moment, which is kind of frightening. However, there are some questions about the thinning midfield, which is, it's always been sort of out of balance. And I think that's what Nigeria lacks. Defensively, they're also quite okay. But it's really the midfield that would be of concern for them. But if they rely on their attack and if they look to push the ball into that final third and play in their opponent's half, I think they absolutely have a chance. And again, Nigeria is the giant of Africa, socio-culturally, socio-politically. geopolitically and obviously footballistically. And so they'll definitely see themselves as having a great opportunity to reassert themselves as the top team on the continent, which they haven't done in quite some time.
And Mbizo, we talk about this competition and how it's seen as an inconvenience for some of these European clubs and how it's frowned upon by the Western culture. How damaging is it at times when young players don't turn up for call-ups? You talk about the 19-year-old at Marseille, Mew, I can't pronounce his name, but not willing to turn up for Cameroon. Is that damaging to the tournament when this tournament generally used to be a showcase for young African players to show what they can do when all these European scouts go there?
I think there's certainly an element of that. I think especially when your bigger name players refuse to go, there is an element of them missing out. But I think in modern times, I think it's the players that miss out more. I think it's a bit of a misguided attempt to demonstrate a commitment to their clubs. But I think another way to demonstrate commitment is to go represent your country and grab the opportunities that you're given and demonstrate that you're of value to any team, including the team that you've unfortunately had to leave to go to Afcon. And so I think for this kid who had never had a call-up, doesn't have a cap, Muge, and he's turning down this kind of opportunity. I think in the long run, it hurts him more than it hurts Cameroon. And certainly Cameroon won't look on it, lightly. They'll see it as a slight. And so will the fans. And so he's certainly not endearing himself to the country. And you might find that in the future, even when he's at the top of his game, whether it's, whatever club he ends up playing for on a consistent basis, he might have difficulty getting into the team because of these broken relations. So while there certainly is a damage that happens to the clubs and to the competition, I think in modern day, with the with the prestige of the tournament growing, the players lose out more than the continent.
Mbizo, we're looking at the odds here on the screen, and it looks like Morocco obviously seems to be the favorite. They capture the hearts and minds of everybody, obviously, in the last few years. But there seems to be a little bit of a hesitation for me to pick a North African team because they don't always have the most success in the sub-Saharan Africa. Talk to me a little bit about Morocco, and do you think they could break that stigma?
I think this is probably their best opportunity to break that stigma. I think Egypt in particular has probably been the most consistent from African teams, followed by probably Tunisia, if I'm correct. But Morocco has a fantastic opportunity. They're flying. Their football is improving on the international level, the domestic level. The women's game is being developed as well in the country. They have an incredible balance of youthful exuberance with poised experience. Some big names coming out of Europe as well. So they'll be looking to really make an impact, and I think they can. Again, we've spoken about it, that on the continent, it's not only your football that matters. You need some serious psychological, mental, and emotional fortitude because there are issues on the continent you don't necessarily deal with when you're in Europe. And so the question will be, can they overcome those obstacles? I think so. I think they can go far, but I'm not sure I would place them as the single favorite either. I would actually say that the hosts, Ivory Coast, stand as favorites.
Which I don't see their odds.
Yeah,
there.
I don't see
Yeah,
their
they're
odds
not
for
even
some
on
reason
there.
on the screen. Yeah.
And Mbizo,
Yeah,
my last thing is this. Obviously, I'm of West African descent. I know about this tournament and stuff like that. Let the American fans know what to expect and the big difference with this competition compared to European Championships and just the colours, the history, the traditions, and how impactful this competition really is.
You used a fantastic word there, Nigel, which is color. And I think that's what you see. The kaleidoscope of African culture, the diversity of the fans and of the peoples that come together for this tournament. I think in terms of the pitch, it's very different from European football because you have a lot more individually talented players. I think you have a lot more dribblers. You have a lot more pace and power. It's an exciting competition. Perhaps the teams aren't as tactically organized as some of your European teams, but the excitement is very much the same. We say on the continent, TIA, this is Africa. And you see that expressed every time on the pitch. It's going to be wonderfully exciting, extremely dramatic, not just with the football, but with the refereeing, with the fans. It's one of the greatest dramas in world football. And I think anyone who's interested in uncovering as well young talents and maybe sending a message to their managers in Europe to say, listen, I think I've seen a player. This is the tournament to do it in.
Ooh, it sounds like a vibe. If I'm an MLS scout,
Oh, yeah.
I am
Watching
front and
closely.
center.
Heck
Yeah.
yeah.
I am front and center.
That's right.
Cover some
Inexpensive,
gems.
but quality players.
Yeah.
Mbizo, you got us all pumped up. You are the best, sir. Thank you so much for taking